Hello and welcome to the Silver King's War. I'm Michael Sievers, the writer, producer, and creator of this podcast series about my father's Second World War as a B-26 bombardier. Today we continue in our review of Stanley's War. It's mid-May of 1945. The war in Europe is over, and the Silver King and his guys are considering the options for what's ahead in their Air Corps service. To his credit, our hero, the Silver King, is cooling off after his letter home regarding his front page picture on the Temple Bulletin for March and April of 1945. And he's helped in that cooling off through two remarkable letters that landed just after he wrote that May 14th letter. Because in a letter he dated May 18th, he related getting a number of letters from home and a late arriving birthday cake. And most surprising of all was a letter from his pilot, Jack Festi, and right after that, a letter from his co-pilot, Jim Fomby Jr. As you recall, they had gone MIA in late February, and the king was forlorn. But now his spirits were rising upon reading those remarkable letters on V-mail. That wonderful news about Festi's boys made the rest of May a good time for the king. Of course, he was getting comfortable as the war had ended, and he and his guys had a chance to relax and enjoy the weather, play some baseball and swim when they could. They were touring the countryside in a Wehrmacht car, picked up some ladies along the way, and then got news late in the month of a 3-day pass that was coming so they could go to Brussels. And in a May 27th letter, the king described Brussels as a wonderful, lively environment over 6 pages. And he was excited to acknowledge that there were beautiful women. And then, of course, they ran into some nurses again from Koblenz. And he's waiting for news about what's next. By the end of May, the king is writing again about the arrival of food and the need for more. And of course, now he realizes that he really needs some fresh dress wear for what's ahead and wants some new green ties and a new cap. And of course, now that he's back from Brussels and bunking in A-72, he's bored, not sure what to do beyond writing and playing, and has gone on to explain the differences in why he was writing from Germany and Holland. And by the way, the Silver King's need for a resupply on his kosher pickles is critical to his spring success. The Silver King wrote 10 letters in May over 31 days. And as we would learn later, May was the peak month for his writing after the war in Europe had ended. Stanley's June writing began with great energy because he and his guys were on their way to Paris that first week. And of course, he could relate to the family that while in the city, they often got tight and spent a number of nights at the Lido, and he loved that club. And he loved comparing Brussels and Paris, and he was so happy that he'd had the chance to see them both. And when he returned, happy to say that there were 3 letters from home. From the high of nightlife, the king was now feeling low, as he related in a June 8th letter describing how bad the mail was at that point and that it had been 1 year since he had been home. acknowledging that he was finally really fed up with Army life, he was pushed along by a visit from a colonel who, in describing how the men would get home, said that it was a very top secret piece of information and that only 6 people knew about the group's future. The king and his guys knew, of course, that the colonel was blowing smoke at them. But for a brief diversion, he was going to participate in a big air show. And while he was waiting for the mail service to resume and trying to live with the idea that he may get home within 3 months, he was flying second box and doing the navigation as Ike and Zhukov were in Frankfurt for a meeting. And the king recalled, of course, that the last time they went over Frankfurt, the flak was intense because they were caught by some German fighters. Stanley's mid-June was a little more upbeat because the mail had resumed and he got 3 letters from home, but he still needs those pickles and is desperate for that fighter cap, size 7. On the 18th of June, he describes in a letter that he's getting some packages and acknowledging Father's Day, and they're going through some training and inspections, and by the way, playing ball. And on the 23rd of June, in 5 pages, he's able to relate that the Officers Club is finally open and that he's been over there drinking some scotch and reading the letters from home and feeling that he's still in love with Jane, the woman from Birmingham who got married and had a child. And the king is reminding his folks, when they send the food, please put in the Melba toast. Now, as June concludes and the king can report that he and his guys are playing lots of cards, and I imagine he was winning his share of cash, and the weather was still good, so they were playing baseball too. And he had finally gotten word on some organization regarding how he was getting home and relating to his parents that he was 10th in line in terms of the points needed to get home. The Silver King had related his June activities over 9 letters to the folks at home. Of course, he wanted to write as often as he could. He was feeling a little bit lazy and wasn't sure exactly how much information he had to share, but he wanted to stay busy. And now it was July 1945, and the Silver King wrote 5 letters in his first 10 days of the month, and they were all from A72. He was relating just before July 4th that he had gotten 4 letters from home and the food and goodies were arriving, and that was nice. The king is still reporting on transportation problems for he and his guys, although a few of them have started to leave, and he's now 19th on the list, and they're telling them that it may be 3 more months before he gets home, which puts him in Birmingham in October, and he's hoping to see the Crimson Tide play some football games. And finally, he has some excellent news. He's reporting, as he rises on the departure list, that they're waiting on 1 more call from headquarters. And on July 10th, he writes to his family, "This is the letter I've been waiting to write, and I hope you're ready for the good news. I'm coming home. Here's how it will work. I will fly to Paris and then on to England, or I will depart from a French port city. And thank God I finally got the cap and ties, so I'll be looking crisp. And by the way, I miss your letters, but I'm happy to write for the last time from Paris. I love you and miss you, Stan." As we leave the Silver King in mid-July, he's ready to head home, and he's anxious, of course, to make sure that all the transportation links work. Unfortunately, our hero, the Silver King, didn't make his connections, and that wasn't his fault. It was the fault of the commanding officers who had no idea what they were doing or how to do it, as their men who had worked so hard during the war and lived to reach the end were anxious to get home and angry as well. And that anger spilled over to our hero, the Silver King, because he stopped writing home, which seems remarkable when we review his work and his war. But he would wait almost a month before he writes to his family again. And that's how we will end his July of 1945. And this episode of our review of Stanley's War. And you are listening to the Silver King's War.